town in New Jersey, and the neighboring town from my town was the town where Sugar Hill Records was birthed. They had a studio there. The parents, Sylvia and Joe Robinson, had 3 sons that ended up being our childhood friends, and our parents got to know their parents. And my dad would go over to the studio and chop it up with Joe Robinson, Mr. Robinson, and bring me with him. So I would sort of like ear hustle their conversations. And one day I went with my dad, and Mrs. Robinson, Sylvia Robinson, was there. And she was a former performing artist. She had a song called Pillow Talk and was in a group called Mickey and Sylvia. Now, I didn't know all of this at that age. I'm just like, oh, this is like the neighborhood, dope black family that's in the music business, blah, 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 blah. And then I remember seeing the Sugar Hill Records logo, like in a 12-inch, or might have been a 33 1/3, which were vinyl albums back then. And I saw the artwork, and it was like a pop of blue, like a Carolina blue, and it had this swirl of rainbow colors, and it said Sugar Hill on it. And I was like, oh, this is them. And went into one of the studio rooms to sort of get a tour and look around, and Mrs. Robinson was in there behind the board. And I always say that I didn't have aspirations to be in the music business then, or even when I got into it by default. But what I did know, seeing her in there in that way, I was like, if it was something I wanted to do, I could do it because of her. Like, I looked at this woman who was in there, not just sitting in there doing nothing. She was sitting in there working controls, moving knobs, telling people cues in the studio. So I had an awareness at a very young age that, okay, there's a woman in here that's doing something that's not in front of the camera, though she did at one time, but behind the camera. And I think that probably was a seed planted in me, even if I wasn't conscious of it in that moment. You know, you reflect and look back on things that were modeled in front of you, and they take up residency there, even if you don't hold on to it, it's in your subconscious at some point. And as far as getting into the music business, finally, again, I said I did it by default. I was going to college, putting myself through college, didn't have enough money to keep going, and I had already made a connection when I was a youngin' at 15 in a club, in a nightclub in New York, and with a man named Andre Harrell, who was the founder of Uptown Records. And even back then at 15, when I met him, I guess it was like funny to him because he's like, you know, like, what are you doing here? How did you of course, you're 15, you probably look like you're 10. And I told him, I said, oh, my dad dropped me off. And he was like, how are you getting home? And I was like, I'm gonna call my dad. And he was like, I'm gonna drive you home. And that night he did, met my parents, we spoke till the sun came up. And from that moment, he was like, you need to be in the record business. But you're a kid, you're pursuing education, you wanna make your parents proud. So many years later, when I could not afford to pursue my education at the college level anymore, I called him like, remember you told me I should be in the music business? Like, you had a job for me then. Do you still have that job for me? And he was like, oh, I just hired this kid out of DC named Puff Daddy. Do you know him? He throws parties. I was like, Puff got my job? Like, how did you just farm my job out? So we had a good chuckle about it. And I told him my situation. I think honesty is always the best policy. Because even then, I wasn't really trying to get into the music business or pursuing it out of love, for lack of a better word. I was pursuing it out of fear. Fear that I was like, oh, I don't have money now to continue my education. I have to do something to make money.
This narrative in my head, because next year I will turn 50. And you said, wow, like you didn't believe me.
Wow.
Baby, you look good, I'm sorry.
You said, wow. I'm like, y'all looking good.
I'm 52.
I said,
I'm 50 also. I'm 50.
Y'all give us 30-year-olds hope, okay?
I'm trying to
embrace it. But so it's also the 50th year of hip hop that we're celebrating, and I was born in June. So I started to count back the months, right? Well, maybe I was conceived on the day that hip hop was born. So this is my new narrative. Don't tell anybody, I know we got cameras and everything. Don't tell anybody that is not really true, but I didn't ask my parents, but I counted those weeks, and if you've had a baby, it's 40 weeks of being pregnant, so it's 10 months, not 9. And so I figured out it was August 11th, because I was born on June 14th. So August 11th, everybody here has probably heard the story about hip hop being born in the park, Cool Herc on the turntables, right? But that night, my parents were getting busy. And I also want to say that they went to the park jam, right? So they were there, hip hop was born, and then I was conceived. So I just figured I'd make that up. Thank you. I like it, and I want to run with it. And particularly in 2023, when everybody's making up their own narrative, I feel like, why can't I make up mine? So that being from the Bronx, because that is where I'm from, the birthplace of hip hop, I've always been a part of hip hop culture. It's just been in me. I grew up around the Grand Concourse area and the Castle Hill area of the Bronx, which is, if you go there today, it's very hip hop. It just is what it is, right? You just feel it in the air. And that's how it was for me growing up. So I've always been in love with the culture. And when that Sugar Hill record came out, that Tracey was talking about, it was something that I absorbed and I immediately took to, because I love stories. And what I was finding in a lot of these records that were coming out was that I was hearing stories and I was being educated, right? And if you don't
enough credit for it, because we know, even with Sylvia Robinson, she's behind the biggest record of hip hop of all time. Represent the message, all of that. So I feel like they don't get enough credit, but what's your view on it? How do you guys look at it?
That's very obvious that women in hip hop would be written out of the annals of history around hip hop if it wasn't for opportunities like this to share. And I also feel like we need to hold our male counterparts and our brothers accountable, because if they're getting opportunities or access to tell stories or highlight things in the business, I think there should always be something in and on their conscience to make sure if you have, 5 slots or 3 slots of opportunity to put content forth in something, and you're a male who's benefited especially from women behind the scenes in hip hop for you, just earmark one of those spots for a woman. I think we have to be able to have a little bit more equality in that. It's always a pay gap situation. It's always a personnel imbalance with that. And I think just this is a testament, though, however, how there's really an unsung group of sheroes in the music business. There just really, really are. And I know I hope to highlight some of that, and even being here is because of Kim. Kim did this panel last year and was I think we were just in the car one day, and Maul called Kim about this year's up and coming panel and wanting to make sure that there was female representation. And I literally, and this is another thing too sometimes, I think people look at people like us that have had either decorated or storied careers or things that you've heard about. We still get it the same way anybody else would get it. I just happen to be in her car at the right place at the right time to come here and be able to share with you guys. And also because when you're a woman on the receiving side of that, where you've experienced that imbalance, and you do, no matter how high up the ladder you go, you feel even that much more sort of endeared to your fellow sisters to bring them along into opportunities and make sure that the spotlight is getting told on a lot of these stories. And again, the beauty about what Kim is doing and has been doing is the storytelling aspect of it. I just started writing a book myself so that I could tell some of my story, I think maybe clear up some of the misconceptions, one of it being easy. It's never anything really worth having or any plateau worth getting to. It's never easy, and it's even harder when you're trying to do it for more than just you. The me generation, they flourishing out here because they ain't carrying the we on their back. You know, you have to have really broad shoulders to go through and endure a lot of things when you're trying to bring other people through with you. And people on the opposing side of that, they know that that's what you're trying to do. And it's not, and at that point, it's not just a woman thing. It's a Black, alternative, Latin, you know, it's anyone that's considered in a minority group. And again, when you're a woman and you're not of an Anglo ethnicity, you're considered a double minority. But for me, I look at those things like, okay, that's double my responsibility. Like, what am I gonna do? I'm not gonna sit around and pout about it. I'm not gonna complain about it. I'm going to make credit.
Correct.
And for me, and I find for a lot of women, when we do certain things, we're not really looking for the credit. And that nurturing sort of quality that Tracey talked about in women, it's just a natural thing, right? It's less ego, right? Like, I found myself in a lot of situations with men in the industry where I'm the one diffusing it, right? Whether it is a meeting or so, I'm the one that's coming in and I'm like, hold on, because we are sort of made, especially in hip hop, which is such an over masculine industry, right? We've been made to appear a certain way. So as women, when we come in this situation, we're not always looking for the credit. But what happens in that is, I do think years go by and a lot of women get erased. A lot of women get replaced, right? A lot of older women get replaced by younger women. And I think now that it is our responsibility to tell the stories. And as a storyteller, and Tracey told a little bit about the story about her getting here, us being in the car, you know, and getting the call. But aside from that, it's always on my conscience to make sure not just the powerful women with incredible stories, but my friends, right? Because I'm gonna look out for them, are able to tell their stories. And one of the things that she says about me, this is a little personal now, so we're gonna get a little therapeutic in here, is that in my relationships, I fall in love with the story. And that's what she has told me before. So I'm working on that, just so you guys know. But Tracey has constantly said that to me, because you fall in love with the story. And I do, it's what I've been doing, I research, I'm a storyteller. But I am also in love with Tracey's story. And that has made me, I don't know if you guys watched the Wu-Tang series. Did you guys watch that? Did you see the Tracey Waples in there? So I'm a fan of what she has done in the music business, and coming up together and just being able to admire other women was a big part of why I wanted to do what I was doing. And so I love her story, and I want her to tell her story, and I feel like it's my responsibility that Tracey and other friends of mine who have these incredible stories in hip hop get to tell them. So when I have a platform that I'm on and I think about it and they invite me to come back, and thank y'all for inviting me to come back, I want to bring my friends with me, because I want you to experience their story as well as mine. Right. Because there are so many stories in hip hop, a lot of women's stories in hip hop that haven't been told. And when you hear about them and you experience them, you see how important women have been in this business, in hip hop. And I love that, and I just want to keep that going. So for me, that's kind of a mission, right? I'm like, okay, we have a lot of stories, we need to share these stories, we need to share our experiences, because when
they're choosing, and it's kind of like babysitting, managing, it's coming away from the art of A&R, from when you were in it early.
So I have this conversation with people regularly, and I'm not the type of person that, you know, wants to cast aspersions on anybody or indict somebody for being an inept A&R now versus back then.
Right.
I think the real thing of accountability where this lies is with the model around the music. The music business now is just, they're employing people that they just want to almost be seat fillers for AI technology, my personal perspective. I think I mentor young people all the time. It's heartbreaking to me to know that there are executives that are in these positions that are making money that are miserable. They're so unfulfilled. They're not given any sort of creative freedom or creative latitude. They're literally doing things that feel more like someone on a line in a factory. But if you think about the music business and the model around the music business, it has become a very sort of plug and play from a business vantage point. Now the artists that are making it, you have all the creative agency in the world, like this beautiful young man sitting down listening to this right now, the Russell.
Right.
He is such a great poster child and model for the way people should really be paying attention to how to do it if they really love it. You can tell from a very granular level.
Right.
He really loves it, enjoys it. He might be one of the happiest artists that I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, it's changed so much, you know, and I talk about this a lot because when I was coming up as a journalist, all I wanted to do was get to the source. That was the Bible of hip hop. And I had a job at Double XL, I'll tell you a little story. I had a job at Double XL for a month because I got there, I finally landed an editorial position at a very popular magazine, and then the source called a month later. And I was like, I'm out. This is really where I wanted to be, was at the source. And at the time, XXL wasn't the same sort of institution that it has somehow become. That was a little hate. Somehow become. She's like, it was. So
We got it.
that's what I like. Because the source was a family. But it was also a family of journalists who had come up in the culture. So we were covering the culture objectively, but from within the culture to protect the culture. And we took that responsibility really seriously, right? So there were times where, and there were a lot of layers in our storytelling. So I couldn't just write a story and send it to the printer.
Right.
It had to go to an editor, it had to go to a fact checker in the research department. They had to listen to my tapes to make sure that I wasn't there just saying, well, y'all know that Jay-Z said this, right? Like, I couldn't do that at the source. We couldn't do that. But today, you can kind of do that.
Yeah. The integrity is not there no more.
You can I can tweet right now, and I'm such a credible, trusted source, right? Think about if I just woke up today and was like, today I wanna, can I curse? Fuck somebody's career, right? Let's just say that I felt like that. With the history that I have in this game, I could go online and I could create a fake story and I could put it out there, and then all of the outlets can retweet it, and now it's real.
It's real.
And as crazy as that sounds, because I'd never do that, my conscience would be eating me up. People do that. And that's what's happening in hip hop journalism, right? So now that we see that, and for me, someone who studies it and is able to scroll and has the background to say, well, I don't care who it is, New York Times, Rolling Stone, especially someone mentioned that whole Rolling Stone thing to me yesterday, I'm going to check this out. Because I don't even trust the journalists that are writing for the publications.
Right.
First of all, y'all put it up too fast. You couldn't have did a story that fast, right? So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do my homework. And I'm gonna read it, and I'm gonna look at who wrote it, and I'm gonna then go fact check it, and I'm gonna check other timelines, because we're consuming our content in this space mainly off of social media, right? My Instagram feed is my morning news scroll. So when I get up in the morning and I scroll down, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, that's how I'm consuming the news in the space, entertainment, right? And if you are paying attention, most of the stuff, I'm gonna say, or at least maybe I follow some crazy people, is not all the way true. It's not fact checked. It's not verified, right? Because now, I remember when I got my verification, it was like very early in the verification process, and I felt so good, right? I had to give a lot of, I had to show all my links, and I had to get verified. Now you can just pay to be verified, right? So anybody can just get verified. You pay, you fill out the application, you do whatever. I don't even know what you have to do, but you can just pay. So it's very important for me to do my homework because I've been in the media and figure out what's real and what's fake. But unfortunately, because of and I don't fault the viewers or the consumers either, right? Because my kids are coming up in this generation.
Right.
And so they're scrolling and they're reading. And if you're spoon feeding something so much, you're gonna believe it. And so what we need to do is take control of that again with our own minds, with our own research, be able to have communication with people, talk. Everything is not real out there. And so journalism has changed so much, but we have to advance. It's almost like technology is going too fast for journalism. And so we can't figure that out until we challenge that. Right. Until we step up, until we say something, until we take our voice and use it to say, hold on a second. Sometimes I have to catch myself. I'm like, don't get into it. You don't want to be, taken through this on IG or on Twitter just because I decided to say, y'all know that they didn't get $50 million for this, right? If I say it, it's going to, all the backlash will come, right? And you have the social media cancellation. And you can write your
educated about what it is you believe you want to do in that moment, but get educated about everything that's attached to it. Because you may think that your desire is to do one specific thing that you may or may not be good at or even qualified for. But if it's something that's innately germane to you, then learning about other things that connect to it may steer you in the better direction of that. So there's always these sort of tentacle things or outpost things to do around something that may draw you in at its core. And then the other thing is be really intentional and really clear-minded about your decisions. It's not easy to commit to something long-term. This is not none of this is for the faint of heart. And it's, you hear these things that sound so cliche, but when you do anything in life the real way, it's really not a sprint, it is a marathon. Why? Because you want to have something that's long-term and sustainable. We always hear that about like agriculture and crops, about sustainability. But you are a human being. Plants have life cycles, you have a life cycle. Are you committing to things that are going to allow you to have some sort of long-term sustainability? And even if there's flexibility in it, right? Because you do have to be sort of agile. You can't be so rigid where you're not nimble enough to pivot. One thing I didn't do a good job of, me personally, I ignored the pivot cues in my career. I was so dead set on the way I thought this was going to go, the way I thought it was going to be. And again, you hear this too, and it sounds cliche, but it's like there's man's plans, and then God laughs at those plans. That's real talk, So you have to be not just nimble enough, but also decluttered of so many things that will distract you from sort of hearing that still small voice that's telling you when to move, where to move, what steps to take, what's going to get you closer. Because sometimes your desires and what you were purposed and brought here to do by the Creator they could be diametrically opposed, they could be worlds apart, they could be closer than you think. But it's just like I tell people this with the pandemic. We didn't know that was going to happen. So it felt like the sky was falling to so many people. But if there was certain instances along the way where you were paying attention and having some sort of intention, attention, mindfulness, you were like, we heading towards something. I'm sorry, stuff don't feel right. Like something just feels off. The energy feels off. the computers are like taking too much of people's attention. Something seismic felt like it was gonna have to happen to have a sort of reset. And I guess for me, it's like, man, if I had known, you always gonna end up saying, if I had known then what I know now. The truth is, you do know it now. You're just not connected to it. You're not paying attention to it. We're so distracted by a myriad of different things. And in my age coming up, we didn't have all the social media distractions. I just had a hard head. I was like, I'm doing this is what I'm doing, and I'm gonna do it to the death. Or I'm gonna just do it until the wheels fall off. I'm gonna do it like that. And it's just like, no, there were other ways to express that and different channels that I could have taken myself out of one situation and just pivoted and gone willingly into it instead of some seismic life experience happening that takes you all the way down to the ground and you're like, oh, well, I'm gonna go over there now. You know, it's like, you don't wanna have those harsh life lessons. And so for me, I'm always like, you know, I wanna at least share that part of it too, because you can't force anybody to do something. We're all going through those periods of hard-headedness. We will all come across people who are older than us, have more wisdom than us from experience, but we wanna do it our way. And I think, you know, the biggest thing that I would impart is that your way is not always the right way, doesn't mean it's the wrong way. It means there are alternative ways to do things and get to where it is you're supposed to go. But you have to be willing to sort of yield to hearing good information or being able to have sensory experiences, which is weird, because a lot of times if you look back over your life, I know you was like, thinking about you was gonna go to this party and then you didn't, and then the next day you hear that shit got shot up and you like, whew. You listened to something in you, something nudged you or moved you, even if it made you too tired. There was a reason that something prevented you from doing it. I think we have to be able to detach more, because now more than ever, that little inner, it's a small inner thing. It's not like a loud thing that's gonna say, don't go there, don't do that. You know, something very subtle. You have to be able to have enough mindfulness and presence of mind to just receive some of those things that are saying things to you. It's very hard to do it. But I would implore every person in this room to pray, meditate, read your word, get on your dean, whatever's your, you know, I'm not here to say what anybody's thing should be, but you have to take care of yourself in that way. The best, every gift and every morsel of information, y'all already got it inside of you. You the goal. You are. You know, you don't have to look for things externally. You will be led to where you need to be. You'll meet the right people. But you have to take time for yourself and have a lot of self-care and discipline. You know, life is a discipline, you know. So again, just not waiting till the latter side of your life to go through so many things, some more devastational than others. Because a lot of times people figure that out when it's too late, and sometimes there's no coming back from it at a certain point. So, you know, just give yourself grace on your journey. You're gonna get to exactly where you're supposed to be. Sometimes we're so hard on ourselves about not getting there or it not happening the way we saw it happening, and it's like, does that matter really? Does it really matter as long as you get to where your purpose is guiding you to? It doesn't really matter. The details of it don't matter. You want to live through it, and you want to be able to like see it and feel it and enjoy it. And so you know, just be more present, turn off the distractions, and make a conscious effort to do it. It'll go long.
So advice, I would say everybody's path is different, right? And you're not probably gonna get to the same destination by following the same path that someone did. Everyone has their own way of figuring things out and finding success. I think when Tracey talked about the pivot, it really resonated with me, especially because a lot of times I don't perceive right? What I'm doing is I'm still dreaming, like Dave said, right? I'm still looking, what's next? Where am I going? How am I gonna get there? And I'm somebody that has mastered the pivot. So I see it before it's coming, I turn, I'm out, right? One career, I'll do this, something, I'll kind of get an inkling. And I pride myself on being someone who can forecast and see something before it's coming, right? I've always had that. It's what helped me at the source. So I see it, and then I go for it. And when everyone's trying to get in, because everybody's trying to get into like the space I'm in with TV now, I'm like, okay, they're coming. Where am I going next? Because they're coming for my checks, right? And although we can all share in that, when the bubble gets too big, it's going to burst, right? So I've been good at that. The flip side of that is because I've done that and jumped out of a lot of things, I haven't what I consider to be reached my full potential in a lot of the places that I have been, right? Because I like to jump out. And that's my path, and it's different, and I'm still learning and I'm still growing. But one of the things I would say that I would like to share from my experience is to just kind of stay on your path and don't be so concerned, right, with what everyone else is doing, because it can distract you. And I am one that is easily distracted. So try to stay really focused. You have to believe in yourself, but also you have to surround yourself with people who believe in you. So that is something that I feel like I've learned and I'm still learning and taking away from. I am way more successful in a group of people who believe I'm successful. When I walk into a room and they don't think I'm successful, guess what? I'm not successful, and it's a mindset. So I think in building your team, you build your team with like-minded people, and you can grow together. And everybody wants to see their friends win, right? Or at least that's how it should be. I know Damon talks about that a lot, right? Like, I don't want to be, or I think so many people have said it, right? But I don't want to be the only rich person in my circle.
Right.
That's not any fun, because then you pay for everything.
Then you become the bank.
So you want to be able to build a team where you'll be successful one minute, but when you're not